I hate to break up the party, but we'll start a party of another sort. I'm going to call to order the Fort Ord Reuse Authority Board of Directors meeting for Friday, December 13th, 2019. And let's see, which of our high-spirited board members... Actually, oh, I think he... He of sartorial splendor. Director Wizard, would you lead us in the pledge? Thank you. And next on the agenda is closed session. And Counsel, would you let us all know what we're going to be discussing in closed session?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members of the board and public, the FORA board will adjourn to closed session under items 3A, B, and C. 3A is conference with legal counsel, Government Code Section 54956.9A D1. That's Resource Environmental, Inc. versus Fort Ord Reuse Authority, Monterey County Superior Court case number 19CV4499. That is a matter of pending litigation. 3B, conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation pursuant to paragraph 4 of subdivision D, California Government Code Section 54956.9, one potential case. And finally, 3C, public employment, Government Code Section 54959.7B. It's a personnel matter, executive officer succession planning report.
Thank you. Is there any member of the public who would like to comment on any of these items that are going to be taken up in closed session? Seeing no one coming forward, we will recess to closed session and rejoin you shortly. All right, I am going to reconvene the Fort Ord Reuse Authority Board of Directors meeting for Friday, December 13th, 2019. And Counsel, would you let us know if there's any action we need to report out of closed session?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members of the board and public, the FORA board did meet in closed session on items 3A, 3B, and 3C. Item 3A, there was nothing to report out. Item 3B, Counsel was given direction specifically, and we'll take that direction, but there's nothing to report. And on the final item 3C, public employment, personnel matter, executive officer succession planning report, I'm pleased to report out that Josh Metz has been appointed as the new executive officer effective January 1, 2020.
Thank you. We'll move now to acknowledgments, announcements, and correspondence. Mr. Hulamard.
Yes, Chair, we have a couple of important announcements. The first one is some of you have asked regarding the fiscal status of Fort Ord and the financial audit. Because of the overwhelming amount of work that our accountants are doing and the fact that this is particularly going to be a box audit, they're somewhat delayed, and so the audit won't be arriving until January for Finance Committee consideration. So it'll come to the board hopefully not later than February, but maybe in January. Okay, thank you. And then the second item is the Fort Ord Multi-Species Habitat Conservation Plan was published last month along with an EIS-EIR. Those documents went out. The Army has provided comments. Landwatch has submitted comments. BLM has submitted comments. In fact, I think Landwatch, the board members have received at least 3, if not 4, comments. And so those will all be reviewed and worked with by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and others. The deadline for comments to be received is 5 p.m. They have to be in writing, December 16th, 2019. So, Chair, that's all I have under announcements.
Thank you. And another item under this heading is a resolution. Doesn't seem to have a number, but it is acknowledging Michael Hulamard. This is our executive officer's last regular meeting of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, and so, as is the fine tradition at FORA, there has been crafted a resolution. Of course, you don't know yet what it says, so I don't know how you could adopt it, but we will read it into the record, and then if you approve of it, I guess we can approve it. And so what I'm going to do is, because Michael has been here for so many years and has worked with so many of us and you, I'm going to start reading the resolution, and just for ease of logistics, I will then pass it to my left, and the next person will read the next whereas, and then the person after that will read the whereas after that, and we're going to move it along that way. And according to my counting, which is imperfect, it should end at Senator Monning, who will read the "now therefore be it resolved." And then, of course, being a fine public servant, he also has a recognition. And then once we do that, I guess I'll open it up for any comments that people want to make, and then we will gather under the FORA banner there and have a picture taken with Michael with all of us. So that's my plan. So 1, 2, 3, go. All right, here it is. I just happen to have right here something that says Fort Ord Reuse Authority Resolution of Acknowledgement and Appreciation, and the number is 19-14. Michael A. Hulamard, Jr. The Fort Ord Reuse Authority Board of Directors hereby resolves that, whereas following the 1992 closure of former Fort Ord, which had served for nearly a century as a military outpost or installation and as a major facility for training of infantry for many decades, and
whereas upon closure, over 30,000 military personnel and their families were rapidly relocated from the area, leaving many local and civilian residents without jobs, severely impacting revenues for cities, special districts, the county of Monterey, and businesses as supplemental government revenues were discontinued, and
whereas, after several attempts by jurisdiction and residents to grapple with the immediate economic impact and planning for rebuilding of the regional economy and community reuse of the former military base, the Fort Ord Reuse Authority, FORA, was formed by special legislative action to serve as the regional agency for reuse planning, financing, and implementation of the base reuse plan and conversion of the former base to civilian reuse, and
whereas Michael A. Hulamard, Jr. obtained his bachelor's degree in political science from the University of California, Santa Barbara, a master's degree in urban studies from Occidental College, was a graduate of the prestigious CORO Foundation Fellowship Program, is a certified special districts administrator, and has served or currently serves as an active participant and or an officer on many public and private boards and commissions, including representing the state of California on the National Governors Association Federal Facilities Environmental Cleanup Working Group, and serving as president of the Association of Defense Communities, and
whereas Mr. Hulamard came to the Central Coast region by accepting a position with the University of California, Santa Cruz, UCSC, as Executive Assistant to the Chancellor and Director of Community Planning and Land Development, having previously served in career positions, including a gubernatorial appointment as a deputy in the California Department of Housing and Community Development, as a project manager for the Pasadena Redevelopment Agency, as Executive Director of the Southern California Urban Coalition, as Director of the Pasadena Urban Coalition, and as Assistant Dean Director at the UCSB Office of Veterans Affairs, and
whereas Mr. Hulamard initially served as the UCSC representative on the Board of Directors and then left UCSC in 1990 to serve as the executive officer of FORA, hereby resulting in a UC administrative loss of the highest magnitude, and
whereas Mr. Hulamard was selected as both the Monterey Herald's Public Enemy #1 and the Chamber of Commerce Citizen of the Year within the same 3-month period, and
whereas, under Mr. Hulamard's skilled and creative leadership, FORA has successfully obtained over $400 million in funding for conversion since inception, including a $100 million removal of munitions and explosives program, imperative for reuse of the former military base, has implemented important and exemplary demonstration projects for deconstruction and containment of hazardous building and toxic waste products, has provided oversight and management of the numerous requirements specified within the base reuse plan, as well as by regulatory agencies which directly govern and affect reuse planning and implementation, has weathered a national economic recession which significantly slowed and impacted reuse recovery and project scheduling, has initiated and led the effort which established the Fort National Monument for open space, conservation, and community recreational use, and among its many other accomplishments was declared a national model in base reuse by the Department of Defense and now is a $1.5 billion asset for the region.
Whereas Mr. Hulamard knows everyone relevant to FORA's work as a defense community and has been incredibly generous with introductions, sharing his knowledge and experience and connections to help others become successful in their efforts. Plus, he knows the best bourbon bars in Washington, D.C.
Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Fort Ord Reuse Authority Board of Directors extends its best wishes and sincere thanks and appreciation for demonstrated, singularly capable and professional leadership throughout the reuse planning, financing, and implementation process, as well as the current transition of the agency to Michael A. Hulamard Jr. as he retires from nearly 23 years as the Executive Officer of FORA, signed by FORA Board Chair Jane Parker. I'm going to walk it up to you, and then I'm going to return to my microphone. And Madam Chair, if I might keep the floor, and on behalf of the California State Senate, it's my honor to present this certificate of recognition to Michael A. Hulamard Jr., Fort Ord Reuse Authority Executive Officer 1997 to 2019. On behalf of the California State Senate, I want to extend my personal thanks and sincere appreciation for your service to the Fort Ord Reuse Authority. During your tenure, you spearheaded many projects that improved the economy, conservation, and restructuring of the former Fort Ord and Greater Monterey Bay region. To name a few achievements, you directly played a role in establishing the California Central Coast Veterans Cemetery, the California State University, Monterey Bay, and the Fort Ord National Monument. For all these reasons and many more, on behalf of the California State Senate, I wish you the best in retirement and happiness in your future. Signed, California State Senate. I'm going to bring this to you as well. And you can clap again.
So, thank you so much, Senator, and thanks everyone. I think we do want to give Michael a chance to say something, but let's really try to, work up his emotions and embarrass him as much as possible before that moment comes.
You've already started.
Because, we do have his wife Christine here videoing, so we want to be able to capture the most robust emotional moment possible. So I want to open it up to board members. If anyone would like to say anything from your own personal or jurisdictional viewpoint at this juncture. Yes, Director Garfield.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of going to Washington, D.C. to the Defense Communities Association with Supervisor Adams. And it was an incredible opportunity to try and walk across the floor of the conference center with Michael because you couldn't make any progress at all. There were an enormous number of people from cities across the country who had not just kind words, but really thankful words for the work he's done here at FORA that enabled them in their communities to create successful transitions from military bases to economic viability. And a lot of that is under the radar. It's been done, it's passed, it's a foundation, but that's in use across the country. And so taking a walk with Michael is like walk, walk, stop, listen, talk, walk, walk, stop, listen, talk. So it was a pleasure to see that, and I just wanted to call that to our attention.
Thank you. Yes, Director Phillips.
I can't think of a more challenging job to have than what you've done here. And so many of us were around at the time when Port Ord closed. I mean, it was devastating to the community when you had 35,000 people just gone, especially Seaside and Marina were hit the worst. And to be able to put this together with all the jurisdictions and everything you've done, and I shared the same experience when I went back to Washington, D.C. and got educated of things. The amount of respect that you have and influence that you have there is it really benefits this community so much. So we thank you for your years of service on behalf of all of us at the county. So,
Director Adams.
Thank you. Others have already talked about your professional qualifications and the excellent work that you've done, but I just really want to thank you for your graciousness. When going back to Washington with Ms. Garfield and a few others at that point, just everything that you did, Michael, I think really stands to show the man that you are. From greeting us when we got out of the taxi at the hotel, to ensuring wherever we were on the walk, walk, stop, introducing us, to people who were, significant people, and also to the friends that you have there. And I really believe that graciousness and that sense of just kindness is you. And I thank you so much for that and for sharing that with us for these past years.
You're going to get me crying.
Thank you. That's the point. Dr. Ochoa.
Well, some of the testimonials remind me of the saying, it's hard to be a prophet in your own land. But I was thinking, before that, I was thinking about an old blues song. You don't miss your water till your well runs dry. It's very often that we don't appreciate what we have until we gain a little perspective on it. I certainly gained perspective on California State University when I went to Washington and I saw the high regard they held our system in. And I think with Michael, it's a similar situation. He's really a national leader in this field and is widely viewed that way. And it's been a great pleasure for me to work with him the entire time that I've been here at CSUMB. And he has done, I think, a masterful job of managing and navigating all of the cross currents that a complex community like this creates. So thank you, Michael.
Thank you.
Yes, Director Ramers and then Director Gunter.
I won't repeat everything that's been said, but I had the same opportunity, walk, walk, stop, and it was marvelous to understand. It was wonderful to see the respect when you're away from your home community and the bigger picture, and it was an opportunity for that. And as one of the newer people on this board, he did a marvelous job of helping to educate me in what FORA was all about and where FORA had started and where FORA was going to be going. And this is the most challenging experience I've witnessed on a board in my experience of volunteering throughout my life. So this was has been a challenge, and I think to be applauded. All that has been accomplished on the Fort Ord property is really a compliment to you for getting so much done with so many variables. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And we will miss you.
One thing about Michael, he's graciously taken in several electeds that are in this room and herded cats, and I think that's something that's very difficult, and with all the personalities and all the people's special interests for their cities. And he's been able to guide us all in us non-land use cities so that we understand what's going on. And being involved with the Mayor's Association, I've heard other mayors say, they've ran into Michael, and Michael was able to explain to him everything that was going on at FORA, and they are just impressed. And people said, would he like to be a city manager somewhere? Hopefully I don't have any in the room that are going, oh my God, our job's on the line. But I think he's taken all of us in to his family here at the FORA family, and whether we like each other or not at certain meetings or certain decisions, I think he's always looked out for the people in the land. And to his wife, I give her a lot of credit. She's kept him on track and focused, and she's been his biggest, strongest ally in this, and sometimes that gets forgotten in the world that we're all in. And Michael, you will be definitely missed. I know Josh is willing to step into this hurricane, and hopefully he will be able to survive it as well as you. Thank you.
So, Michael, I want to follow on what Dr. Ochoa said, and I want to thank you for recognizing and giving space to those cross currents. And I want to thank you for the respect that you've given to me as a member of this board, being often the deliverer of a cross current in looking out for the interest of Marina, which may not always be identical to the interest of those other board members that you also respect, and trying to find that balance. So I thank you for that from the city of Marina, and we look forward to you having a happy retirement and enjoying your life without the stresses of FORA.
Senator Monning?
Thank you. I thank the senator. I'm glad. I wanted to go right after Gail, because that's what I was thinking about, the cross currents. And I want to assure everybody that I never had opportunity to talk to Michael where he was not that professional, and he took everybody's views into consideration and never was on either side, even when I was wondering why you're not on my side, right? Why you're not on my side, right? But that's who he is. And that's the professionalism that he brought to the situation of herding these cats. And sometimes we don't know how important it is when we have that straight shooter to go in between us and what we're doing here for. And I like to tell, sometimes I tell some of my constituents or people that don't know is, this is the largest base closure, and Michael has made it a model. You can say, well, it should be the model, it's the largest one. No, he made it the model because I guess as the board changed over years, we could have went different ways. It could have turned out a little differently. But it was that person in the middle that just brought us together and kept the professionalism of the staff focused on what we were trying to accomplish. So I wanted to say that. I want to thank Christine, the lovely wife, for the support that allowed him to stay here. And then I would just add, I think I won't say all of us, I know it's been a couple times in my career on the council where I thought about asking him to be the city manager. Right. So, and then the last thing is, I know we all know a lot of important people, right? We all watch a lot of important people and deal with a lot of educated folks, right? But it was never a time that Margaret did not know what was going on with all of this stuff. All of what FORA does, he had his finger on it, even though there's other staff members that specialized in it. And I would just sit there in amazement and say, how is he retaining all that? Why would he want to? but that's who he is, right? Some managers, right? They say, oh no, I got someone that does that. I got someone that can explain that to you. It's not. No, I know it too, right? And so for him to have done all of that, I just want you to know, from me, I I study professionalism and leadership. So I see it and I know it when I come across it. And, you have to be one of the best in the country. I'm not just, that's not just, I'm telling you, I watch people. I know what's going on, and you are one of the best. And we see that when we go to D.C. that claim to have the best over there, right? And they defer to Michael on a lot of stuff. So I just want to say thank you so much for what you've done for FORA and what you have done for the city of Seaside. And we wish you Godspeed. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor.
And my last point, I'm sorry, Jeff. My last point is we did adopt a resolution at the city council, but Michael's too busy to come down there and get it. And because he is who he is, I signed it anyway. But we did leave off the, the most wanted thing. I don't think that's in there. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll just very quickly echo something that Mayor Oglesby said. As a council member, Director Reimers said, as a new person, there's, you're drinking from a fire hose. There's just so much to know. And not only does Michael have it just at beck and call, all of it, but I never once felt like he was bragging or showing off about how much he knew. I never once felt like I couldn't grasp what he was talking about, because he, as the leader and professional that he is, he moderates what he's saying and shapes the message so that people of all different capacities and all different places in understanding all these things can be part of the team and can come up to speed and be part of the decision. So for that, I'm sure that the people in Seaside are grateful that I'm not sitting here spinning my head asking what's going on. So that was the serious thing I'll say. The not so serious thing I'll say is that when I first met you, I came to your office and got an earful about, 3/4 of my life worth of work that happened before I was blessed to come here. And you showed me some pictures of the history of what you've done in your long life as a leader in communities. And I thought as a young black man, as a young person of color, I thought that was very heartening to see the success that you could have. And I thought maybe one day I could be like him. But you kept your hair.
Anyone else? Yes, Director Gagliardi.
There's actually so much that's already been said, but I did want to just remark and thank Michael for showing me. Well, actually, Michael has the nicest way of telling you you do not know what you're talking about. And I've really tried to incorporate that in just about everything I do in my entire life with my kids. It's been quite helpful. So I just wanted to kind of say that as Director Wizard said and as Director Reimer said, being a newly elected and coming into this place, I mean, this is like stepping into the big leagues, and you have been very, very helpful in in kind of welcoming us into that and then letting us thrive. So thank you very much, Michael.
Thank you.
All right. Director Hoffa.
Yeah, it's pretty much all been said that, you've done an amazing job here, and this is really a Herculean task given all of the headwinds. So I really just want to personally congratulate you on a job well done and wish you a wonderful time in retirement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other of the ex officio board members wanting to speak? Some of you have been working with Mr. Hulamard for a while. Okay. Senator Monning.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I shared a summary in the resolution that we presented, but I just wanted to focus in a little bit on, I think my closest work with Michael has been on establishing the California Central Coast Veterans Cemetery. And it was a dream for about 20 years, but an unfulfilled dream of many in the veterans community and the broader community. And in our work to get to groundbreaking and then ribbon cutting, and now our second funding commitment from the federal government. Michael and his team have been instrumental in navigating what were often surprises, barriers, roadblocks along the way. And it was his knowledge of juggling federal government, state government, local governments. I need to acknowledge the city of Seaside, which transferred the land at no cost, transferred the deed, demonstrating its support for the veterans community. But we had many phone calls when there was a new wrinkle, a new surprise, a new barrier. And as many have said, I think one of Michael's strengths as an administrator was to always be dispassionate, to present the facts and to present options, but never to be an advocate where that would have been an inappropriate exercise of his role. He was always totally deferential to the authority of this board to make decisions. And his role was to inform this board as you made your decisions. That veteran cemetery, it's being serving families virtually every day of the week and is about to embark in 2020 on the expansion to establish in-ground burials. But I know I speak on behalf of the veterans community to thank you particularly. One just final comment, we're at one point where we had to transfer the deed to the state, but I think it had to go from Seaside to the county to the state, and a process that normally takes weeks or months or years, and we had 10 or 12 days to get it done, and we were able to get it done. But the power that got that done was Michael helping us move it along. So thank you, Michael. And also I want to add my thanks to Christine. I know part of the family challenge, Christine is a recognized professional back at UC Santa Cruz, but they maintained a bi-coastal relationship for a number of years for her to pursue her professional goals that Michael was supportive of, but the sacrifice for him to be able to continue in his work here. We thank you, Michael. Thank you, Christine, and wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks all the board members for your comments. We don't normally open up to the public on announcements, but I just thought if there's anyone here who, any member of the public who would like to say a few words to or about Michael at this point, I would be open to that.
I'll definitely take advantage of that. I was having lunch this afternoon at Deli Delicious, and Christine and Michael happened to come in, and so we were able to sit down for 10 or 15 minutes and talk. And I got to know Christine a little bit, and I truly believe that is your better half, Michael. Everyone was talking about how great you've been at FORA, and you've done a tremendous job, but I express my gratitude for working with you for 6.5 years, and it was a pleasure getting to know you, Christine, and good luck in your retirement. You've done a wonderful job.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to just speak on behalf of the county staff that have worked with Michael for a number of years. And Michael, I think you and I have worked together pretty much since you've been here in one capacity
owe me a martini.
or another. I was just going to get to that. but Michael, you've always been the consummate professional and an amazing communicator and collaborator. And the county staff that I've worked with and have worked with you all have appreciated that. And we want to thank you for a job well done. So thank you.
Thank you.
Michael, you're a much better man than I, Michael. And you've done a fantastic job. You know, working with a diverse group is very difficult because even though you might be able to finesse them, educate them, move them along, there's no control once they leave the room. It becomes impossible to really maintain a direction if everyone's not pulling together. I congratulate you for everything you've done. I understand your compassion for working people. You've always expressed that in our conversations, and I've always appreciated everything you've done. I just wish the board, whenever they left into their own communities, would have been as compassionate as you. But they have done some good work. They've helped workers in Sacramento and Fresno and Modesto and Temecula and Bakersfield buy homes, which is a great thing. So anyway, I wish you all the success in the future. I hope you have a wonderful life with your wife. You deserve it. You've worked hard. I'm honored to call you my friend. And anytime you want to have some bourbon or anything else, I'm ready to do it with you. So thank you for everything you've done, and I hope to see you down the road.
Thank you, Ron.
I don't normally speak at FORA board meetings, but I just wanted to say that, with a lot of elected officials shared their experiences with your professionalism, and I want to say that that doesn't stop at staff, and it sometimes does. So it's very much appreciated, and I want to share that when I first started this job over 9 years ago now, the very first time I got yelled at by an elected official was at a FORA board meeting, and I was brand new, and I didn't know what I was doing, and you'll never forget that moment, especially as a staffer. You don't. But you actually came to my defense, and it meant a lot to me at that time, and you diffused the situation, and I'll never forget it. So thank you for always extending your professionalism to staff and not just elected officials. I think I speak on behalf of all of Senator Bonning's staff that you've worked wonderfully with us, and we very much so appreciate that.
Oh boy, I've got some roasting for you. No, I'm just kidding. Paid professional here, so I could talk for a long time, but I have a very long history with Michael. I met Michael before I was really actively doing law. I worked at UCSC with Michael, and I want to thank you for the start that you've given a lot of folks in their professional careers, and I'm one of those, and I wanted to thank you from the bottom of my heart. You have a brain like no other, and the one factoid that didn't come up in the resolution is that Michael actually went to law school. You might not know that, but he did. Oh yeah, see, now he's going to crawl
Why are
under
you
the table.
embarrassing me now?
Yeah. And I have to say I really appreciate that, and I appreciate all the rope that you have given me as a staffer, but all the other staff folks that I know at FORA, you treat like a professional and you allow them to grow professionally, and there is nothing that you could ask from a leader more than that. So thank you, and I know we will be in touch.
Doug, yeah, I'm Marina Community Partners, and I'll just start off by saying I agree with most of what Ron said earlier, so that doesn't always happen, but we do agree on this, definitely. Michael, we've known each other for, I don't know how many years? 20 plus years. We were both doing base reuse and redevelopment when I was in Alameda. You were here at national conferences, other things. He's been a friend and a colleague and a source of expertise and information. And I just want to say, though you didn't pursue the path of a professional baseball player, though you were close, I think you've had a long and distinguished career, and good luck in retirement.
Thank you, Doug.
All right, seeing no one else approaching the microphone, I will close public comment, and I've just been reminded that should any of you become inspired about something that you want to say further about Michael, there will be a retirement dinner for him on January 10th. There will be many more opportunities to continue the conversation. And I see that our technique of allowing people to speak and opening it up to the public has allowed us to have one more person join us who might have something that he would like to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everybody. Am I at the FORA meeting? I've never seen this much consensus at a FORA meeting before. Is this the right location? I'm just making sure that this is the right thing. But I think I do believe, Michael, that that does say a heck of a lot about you, that people, despite the issues that I think we've all had at one point or another, people are proud of the work that you have done and so appreciative of the work that you have done. And I want to thank you personally as a friend, basically as someone who grew up here. The fact that we have people like you who are able to move here, come here, inject yourself in the community, and be a part of this community, which I believe in a very, very positive way. So thank you very much. And professionally, I wanted to thank you, as I have right here, a congressional record. And this is what we read in to the record of the House of Representatives. So in front of the House of Representatives, I read the following. I will not read all of it. I just want to focus on the last two paragraphs that say, as the executive officer of FORA, Michael Hulamard oversees the broadly representative agency located on the Monterey Bay, which is responsible for former Fort Ord's conversion to civilian reuse program. Mr. Hulamard also oversees 100 million munitions and explosive cleanup of the 3,400 former Fort Ord acres. In this role, Mr. Hulamard's decisive leadership and expertise resulted in FORA being designated a military base reuse national model by the Department of Defense. Mr. Hulamard's work has been lauded by the Association of Defense Communities, earning him their Local Reuse Authority Executive of the Year Award, which I was honored to present to Michael back in Washington, D.C. earlier this year. And the Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, earning him their Ruth Vreeland Public Official of the Year Award. Michael Hulamard Jr. has served the Central Coast of California with adept leadership and tireless dedication over the past 2 decades, making FORA a model agency for the potential of a civilian reuse program. I hope that Mr. Hulamard enjoys his well-earned retirement, spending time with his beloved wife, Christina Valentino, watching his favorite pastime, baseball, and visiting his cherished hometown of New Orleans. Madam Speaker, I ask that my colleagues join me in recognizing his years of service and encouraging him to laissez bon temps rouler. Congratulations, Michael. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Congressman, and in particular the laissez-les-rouler bon temps. That, for those of you that are not up on your French, that really means let the good times roll. And which is a kind of an interesting point to think about the good times that we've had here at Fort Ord. They haven't always rolled, but the good times we've had resulted in some extraordinary things that this board is responsible for. I was taken by some comments I heard a few weeks ago from folks that had not been here and were just visiting the area, talking about what a wonderful development these new buildings are and the new housing is at Fort Ord, and they couldn't understand why there was ragtag buildings that were just a few blocks away. And then, so I talked to them about the issues, and I said, this has been a quarter of a century process. For 25 years to move from the May 1994 creation of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority to today, we've seen all kinds of very positive things that each and every member of this board and every member of every other board that's preceded it can be proud of. Extraordinary things that other communities have not been able to accomplish at the same scale or level. And I think because of those decisions and the decisions you're going to make over the next 6 months, there'll be a framework, a groundwork that's laid for the individual jurisdictions to take that on and finish the job. Those are really important things. I am personally very proud of all the work we've done. I was looking at what the frustration was way back in 1994, and I saw that there were some people in this room who were at that meeting. Ron Cheshire, for example, and Christy Reimer. 25 years ago, the first meeting of the Fort Ord Reuse Authority occurred. Henry Mello called it to order, and they elected Jack Barlish from the city of Delray Oaks to be the first chair. And everyone in the room was focused on just how things had turned around in a short period of time from when the soldiers started leaving in 1992 till 1994. Tacticali from the city of Marina was greatly concerned that his city was going to be financially distraught and potentially go into the red in a way that they might not recover from because of the number of absent vacancies that were occurring in the local rentals because of the loss of the local commercial enterprises. It was all a really difficult time. Leon Panetta was there. Do you know Leon Panetta, Congressman? And he opened up with some extraordinary comments. He and this young lady named Sylvia was with him. And they made a bunch of comments about what the bright new future could be and how there could be an educational reuse and how the community had called for this wonderful reuse and how there needed to be a regional entity that really looked regionally at the things that had to be happen at Fort Ord. And every representative from Ken White from Carmel to the folks in Salinas, I think Alan Stiles was the mayor then. It was an extraordinary group of folks that really applauded the idea of trying to set a framework that was based in education, based in environmental conservation, but made sure that you do those things that created jobs for the people here in these communities. And we haven't always been successful. The African American community in the city of Seaside has dwindled by way more than half since Fort Ord closed. The diversity of the region has suffered immensely as a consequence. We've lost our ability to provide affordable housing as the properties in these areas have gone way up in price and value. We have done extraordinary things about setting property aside for environmental conservation. We have a great new campus at California State University system, but we can't forget those other commitments we made to create jobs for the folks in this community and to do it in a way that was diverse and culturally respectful and understood that women deserve to be paid equally as men. All of those things were important things, were part of the principles that we started from. In fact, I think there was one comment that always struck me, and I always go back to it. It's one of your predecessor and colleague, Congressman Sam Farr, said when he was talking about the day, he spoke to the whole group of folks that were there that day, and you probably remember this, Ron Cheshire. He said, it isn't just about making Fort Ord reuse an example about living in peace, but building for peace as well. And I think we've done that in a lot of ways. We've been respectful to the folks that served our countries by creating a cemetery here that was important. We created a DOD VA clinic. Thank you both, Congressman Panetta and Senator Monning, for all of your help. But every ex officio and every elected official on this board over the course of a quarter century have contributed to that. We should be proud of it and not be disappointed that we didn't finish. You look at any other community that lost 30,000 folks, roughly 20% or more. It's actually 35,000. The resolution says 30, but it's 35,000 in population left. And that doesn't even think about the secondary and tertiary folks that left because jobs were lost. That really had a major impact. Recreating and doing that to recover is nearly an impossibility. In New Orleans, when they lost population as a consequence of Katrina, went from, I forget the numbers exactly, but from 380, 390,000 down to 250, and they've never gotten back to 300 since. And that's 14 years ago now. So it is not surprising that we haven't finished. I appreciate everything every one of you have to say. I can't tell you how much I appreciate it, because I have what I consider to be an individual relationship with each and every one of you and each and every one of the staff members here. It's been an extraordinary, professional, special, wonderful memory, the work that I've done here. It's been the work of a lifetime. I'll remember each and every one of you in that fond way. So thank you for the time, Chair. And if this was not such an awful historical day for the rest of the country, I might say, and I yield back the rest of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Hulamard, and thank you for your long public service working with complex and sometimes contentious issues. the people were never contentious or complex, but the issues were.
Right.
So and we want to wish you a happy, healthy, long retirement. And so as a final gesture of all of that, I would like to ask all the board members voting in ex officio to gather under the FORA sign there, and we'll take a picture with Michael. And Michael, if you would hold this resolution, and then Mayor Oglesby and Senator Monning, if you would hold your certificates, and Congressman Panetta yours, then we can get a picture.
By the way, all of you that
posterity.
said that Christina was the real reason for any success I've had were absolutely correct.
Thanks everyone for taking this time to acknowledge Mr. Hulamard's long service. We'll move now to roll call. Madam Clerk, are there any people here?
It's only 2 hours later.
Supervisor Parker?
Here.
Supervisor Phillips? Here. Supervisor Adams?
Here.
Councilmember Gagliotti? Here. Councilmember Berkeley? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Morton? Here. Councilmember Hoffa? Here. Mayor Oglesby? Here. Councilmember Wizard? Here. Mayor Carbone? Mayor Gunter? Here. Councilmember Garfield? Here. Councilmember Reimers?
Here.
Congressman Jimmy Panetta? Here. Senator Bill Monning? Here. Erica Parker? Todd Muck? Here. Dr. P.K. Diffenbaugh? Here. Steve Matarazzo? Here. Dr. Ochoa? Here. Colonel Ford? Here. Bill Collins? Here. David Martin? Lisa Reinhardt? Here. And Dr. Matt Zefferman? You have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'll move now to the consent agenda. Are there any board members who would like to pull item for question or comment? Yes, Director Morton and then Director Adams.
Item 7G.
Ditto.
Thank you. 7G, all right. Do you have a specific question or comment on that item?
So I just wanted to verify the staff report is very different than the language in the actual indemnification agreement, in that the staff report talks about a $2 million request, and in fact that is not part of the contract and not under consideration today, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. And so the indemnification is limited to what amount?
$500,000.
Thank you.
And thank you. And my question was on the same lines, but I wanted to know whether LAFCO has indicated that they're willing to sign the amended agreement.
Yes, they have.
Great. Thank you.
All right, so that's 7G. I do just want to draw board members' attention to the fact that 7H is the meeting schedule for next year, and that our new executive officer is coming in with a splash and proposing that we meet on Thursday afternoons instead of Friday afternoons. So that is the schedule that is before you on the consent agenda. So just wanted you to be aware that that's the proposal, and the current executive officer is trying to get my attention. So,
Staff wanted to pull this item for a very brief comment.
Aha. Excellent. So I
that-
think let's consider that done.
The brief comment was simply that the January 9th meeting could be problematic because of other commitments that jurisdictions have on that day already, and that even though the recommendation is to move to Thursday afternoons for the rest of the year, staff would recommend that meeting be January 10th.
Consent. We have a motion by Director Gunter, seconded by Director Phillips. Are there any other comments from board members? Is there any member of the public who has a question or a comment on any of these items? All right, I'll bring it back to this board. Yes, Director Hoffa.
Yeah, I'm fine with this. I just want to let you know I will be late at all of those meetings because I do teach until 2 on Thursdays.
Such late notice for this change.
Okay, any other discussion?
Just the recital on the same page, saying these dates and saying they're the second Friday. That would be corrected to say second Thursday. So when I read it again, I'll go, which one's correct? Thank you.
Thank you. So we do have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That passes unanimously. We'll move now to our business items. Building removal bond legal status review. Mr. Said.
Yes, as Peter's coming to the podium, the FORA staff has continued to move ahead with the direction that was given to us by the FORA board. Peter will give you a quick overview and an outline in this PowerPoint presentation. He's been working very closely with Counsel on this regard, and bond counsel has been adjusted. We are now going to move forward with Quint and Timig versus Stradling as our bond counsel, and Peter will provide you an overhead that will describe some of these items.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Chair. I'm going to try and run through this. Some of this information may be new to some of you, some of it may be old, so I'll try and give a concise report. So there's been a background that many of you are aware of. For those of you who are not, we started in October 2018 investigating the legality and feasibility of a bond issuance. Between October 2018 and 2019, we selected NHA advisors. We provided a legal assessment. The board authorized the executive officer to prepare a bond package. We continue to move forward with a recommendation from the administrative committee on the intent and use of funds. On October 19th, bond counsel advised DOF clarification on pass-through. FORA requested this DOF clarification through Senator Moning's office, and DOF provided a response from the dissolution law perspective. Both of those letters have been provided in your packet, and so there were some questions about what is the DOF response saying. And so in summary, though the letter makes a number of points, the DOF, Department of Finance, is not clear whether the money is secure or not. Specifically, they provided an opinion on dissolution law, and the letter talked about how the dissolution law did not list FORA as having statutory pass-through payments, and how the community redevelopment law does not allow funds to flow as an enforceable obligation. The Department of Finance's opinion does not consider the authorizing act or other legislature actions that have happened. And without real certainty, it's very difficult to have bond investors invest into the bond. And so we're seeking clarification. So the FORA board, this board, authorized the executive officer and authority council to take action as necessary to be able to move this forward. And so the course of action is as follows. First, we were to hold a public hearing to start the Mellow Roost clock pertaining, there's a 60-day clock that gets started. The Monterey County held that public hearing, found that a bond would be in the public benefit. That was completed on December 10th. Forgive me. And the next step of the course of action is to approve the legal documents and bond issuance, and that's the authorizing resolution, which is before you today. The step after that will be consider a validating action or reverse action. And then the following step would be to issue bonds upon successful verification and validation. What is a validating action for those of you who don't know? It simply requires the interested parties to validate their positions on the subject matter at hand. What specifically needs validation or verification? FORA's right to property tax revenue to pay bonds after sunset. That there's a gray area in the law. Affirmation that the county should treat dollars as statutory pass-through. Let me take that back. There's not a gray area in the law. It's pretty clear. It's just we need to have the validating action to make it super clear. How long will this take? After FORA, staff is able to issue bonds within 60 days following its approval. So, the first legal document is the authorizing resolution, and this resolution is in your packet for your consideration. The resolution includes 6 topics. The first is a statement of intended use and funds and public benefit. This mirrors what the county approved. The second is the form of the Indenture of Trust. That's been provided for you to look at. There will be some errata that needs to be adjusted prior to issuance. For instance, a lot of the blanks need to be filled in, etc. Then there's a judicial validating proceedings related to the indenture. And then executive officer authorization to execute the Indenture of Trust, and approval to issue and sell bonds once the validating action is complete, and to sell no more than $55 million in bonds. And so the authorizing resolution for your consideration has those 6 main points for you to look at. The second legal document is the Indenture of Trust. And as you recall, the blue and orange tabs, they're coming out of NHA Advisor's presentation, and so this is just a repeating of that. It provides detail on the cash flow, who the account owners are, how proceeds will be paid. To be clear, the account owners must certify funds were spent on building removal from the approved parcel list. There's a list of approved parcels. Those parcels are public benefit conveyance parcels. Basically, there's not a chance for economic development on them. And to provide trustee management instructions and set parameters for legal investment of funds. We are going to issue 100% taxable on a 100% taxable basis. There's no need to do non-exempt or tax-exempt because there's very little benefit for it. The account owners may reallocate the bond proceeds within their own account, and the account owners have no veto power over other account owners. For example, TAMC will not be able to veto MCWD choosing to allocate excess funds to Marina. That's just a hypothetical. Account owners are not responsible for other projects, meaning that MCWD will not pay the costs of any overruns on an MST project. So the remaining work, December, we're going to complete the fiscal consultant's report. That's the third and last legal document that needs to be completed. The county in January, the county has to pass a resolution to assign the pass-through to the successor entity, and that's just a commitment to, instead of assigning it to FORA, it goes to the successor entity. In January, the successor entity needs to resolve to administer the bond and to take the pass-through from the county and assign that to the trustee. In January, the credit review process with the Standard & Poor's begins, and in February, an agreement on the Monterey County Regional Fire District will be sought between the jurisdictions on how to resolve that particular topic. And our goal is to go out for a bond sale in February and closed. So then we have received some recent communications. It was a rush to get these legal documents out. And because of that, everyone has been working well with us to be able to communicate what's going on. TAMC, MST, and the City of Marina and Authority Council have requested some minor changes. The first one is TAMC and MST. It's provided, their letter is provided for you at your station. And that is they've agreed on an allocation adjustment between the two of them. So we would adjust that allocation within the indenture and the resolution. We are looking to include public benefit public benefit conveyance parcel L5.5.1. That had been inadvertently omitted, and so we want to put that on the list. It doesn't add any cost to the bond, it just identifies it as an additional parcel where buildings could be removed off of. We're looking to fix language, grammar within the Indenture of Trust concerning the assignment of surplus funds, and some various acronyms for the document, and then recalculate the estimated allocation amounts, and that has to do more with the change that TAMC and MST are requesting. So our staff recommendation to you is to receive this report and approve the authorizing resolution with the minor presentations as presented in this report. I'm available for your questions.
Thank you. Any board member questions for Mr. Said? All right, I don't see any questions from board members. Any member of the public with questions or comments on this item?
Kevin Dayton, Government Affairs Liaison, Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce. And I know that this is a complicated financing issue that few people understand, but I can tell you the feeling of the general public is if you don't do something soon about these blighted buildings, they'll be here for generations to come. Because once it goes out into all the different jurisdictions, each jurisdiction is going to have to say, is it a priority for us to spend our money with so many needs on taking down these buildings or not? I brought this before the Monterey Peninsula Chamber of Commerce Government Affairs Committee, and they voted unanimously to support demolition of abandoned, dilapidated buildings with no reuse potential on the former Fort Ord through the current idea of issuing bonds. I'm going to have the Salinas Valley Chamber of Commerce vote on this in January, and I think they'll be supportive. Generally, everybody I talked to says we got to do something about these blighted buildings, and if leadership isn't taken now to do it, what's going to happen in the future? What kind of legacy will be left for future generations? So I hope while this board is still in existence, that you see this as the opportunity to move forward on this and get rid of those buildings. Otherwise, it's going to be marring the Monterey Peninsula region for decades to come. Thank you.
This is Ron Cheshire, Training and Education Director, Monterey Santa Cruz Building Construction Trades Council. We've discussed this with you before. We're in support of you moving forward with this. We have reported that the development community has a rough time attracting businesses and such to come in here because of the blight. On the other hand, the blight was being used by the I don't know quite how to say it, the no growth factor in our community as a hindrance to development. Is that the blight had to be removed before anything could be done, and I used to tell them, well, that's fine and dandy, pull your checkbook out, write me a check for several $1 million, and it'll be taken care of. So I agree with the Chamber and Mr. Dayton. I think that'll be one of the only times Mr. Dayton and I ever agree to anything. And you need to move forward with this. We have to get rid of it. And there will be opportunities that come up for work and such, and we'd be glad to work along with FORA in regards to that. But the blight's got to go. And as far as the $55 million is, I recall that at a prior meeting there was a figure in excess of $55 million to remove all the blight. And I sincerely hope that a partial job is not done and that all the blight's removed. Your $55 million will go a long way to do that. I've talked with our congressman. I'm not going to put him on the spot over here too much, but I have brought this up before you before, is that we would help lobby in regards to legislation at the federal level to get the delta, the difference, to where it could be totally taken care of. And I would hope that the federal government would see the benefit to that. So anyway, we're in support of this. Thank you very much.
I want to point out one thing that I brought up with Peter as we reviewed the report. One of the things we had talked about in the admin committee is most of the blight remains in Marina. We have almost 600 homes, and what we talked about was all the jurisdictions were going to get a percentage amount, then any remaining funds would go to Marina because we're going to have leftover blight. The staff report on page 106, what it reflects is the remaining funds go to Seaside, and so I think that was a typo that those remaining funds are supposed to go to Marina, so I just want to point that out. And to actually agreeing with Ron, to give you a sense of the cost of this blight, many of you may know a building burned down about a month ago, just one of the buildings, and we're cleaning up that building right now. The cost to clean up a building burnt down, $77,000 to clean up a building. People often hear, well, why don't you just burn everything down? Well, it's a $77,000 cost to burn it down. So if you took the 600 remaining buildings in Marina, that's $45 million in just Marina alone. So we urge you to move forward on this bond. It's critical. It's expensive.
Seeing no one else coming forward, I'll close public comment. Mr. Hulamar, do you want to speak to the excess funds question?
I would check with Peter, but I do believe that that's an error that was supposed to be.
That's correct. It was supposed to say Marina. At no time did Seaside advocate for that, and it's been understood by that it was a typo.
Thank you. Any further discussion? I would entertain a motion to move staff's recommendation with the correction to the MST TAMC numbers and the correction to the fact that it's Marina that would receive any excess funds, or if there are any. Okay. Motion.
Question.
Yes.
Just so we're clear.
Director Morton made the motion, sorry, and Director Phillips seconded. Yes. Director Oglesby.
Thank you.
Speak.
Just so we're clear, we're saying excess funds is after all the building removal, blight, and Seaside is taken care of. Is that our understanding?
If you have a penny left,
And
coming back after you finish all of yours.
we would happily send it over to people that need it.
Thank you, Mayor.
Okay.
This is quite the kumbaya meeting. Great. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. That motion passes unanimously. We'll move now to 8B, Transition Plan Draft Implementing Agreements Status Report, and
Yes,
some things about habitat as
We've
well.
had an extraordinary month of progress in many ways, which included a number of meetings that our colleague consultants, RGS, have conducted with the individual jurisdictions, sometimes collectively and sometimes individually. It included a visit with our colleagues in Washington, D.C., Mayor Oglesby, Councilmember Wizard, and others met with our friends in the United States Army and the Office of Economic Adjustment. I think Kendall has a very positive, upbeat report on progress.
I think that's the theme today, right? Positive, upbeat. I'm not going to say misrepresent. No, it's positive. It is. We're continuing to make progress and moving forward. As we all know, we have a 2020 date of sunset, June 30th for FORA. So as we're moving through this process, I want to bring you up to speed on two pieces. One, let's start with the implementing agreements. The implementing agreement draft it's in your package today. That has been circulated to the member agencies, and we are in receipt of comments, which we are updating. What I want to let you know on that is that based on Mr. Hulamard's meetings back in Washington, there are some changes that will be made to that language that reflect Seaside as the individual or the group that will be taking over the economic development and the local reuse authority, which were in the current agreements assigned to the county. Now, once Seaside completes its agreement with FORA and the Army to take over the Environmental Services Cooperative, then we will amend our agreements and get them back out to everyone. But we do anticipate that with those two changes and the additional information we're getting from member agencies, that those should go before the individual boards for adoption or councils for adoption in March, which will again be well before our deadline. If there are any other questions, comments, concerns, we would greatly appreciate receiving those by the middle of January, just to make sure that we can, of course, accommodate any requests. Not surprisingly, not all requests will be made or changed in the agreement, but those that we can, that are sufficient for the other agreements to go along with them, we will get those done. So again, anybody who's got anything that hasn't come to us at this point, please do get them to us. That brings us also to water. MCWD has sent out its agreements for all the member agencies. This is just really an update on that. This also includes the college and whatnot. A reminder that FORA is not in the position to negotiate those agreements between the agencies and MCWD. As MCWD moves forward, it will be relationships between their board and the individual agencies to make those things happen. Now, the cooperative agreement, many of you were in attendance at our November 20th meeting where we brought together the permittees. Want to just reemphasize a couple of things. One, it's our position here with the consultant team and also with FORA that we are not advocating for or against the formation of a cooperative to implement the Habitat Conservation Plan. That being said, we are trying to set up a venue for discussion that would allow the potential permittees to meet and to discuss, hash out, fight it out, to figure out what is the best plan forward. So what we're trying to do is remain as neutral as possible on this, and with the board's direction, what we'd like to do is start convening monthly meetings beginning in January. We assume that these would probably be 8 to 10. These would include getting into great detail about things like the fiscal impact of forming the cooperative, what the actual costs of implementing the plan would be, what the cost would be for the alternative, which would be the habitat management plan, and how that might affect the individual jurisdictions. As Michael mentioned, we have had numerous meetings with local agencies that would be affected by this, and we've already identified some key issues that would need to be resolved. I want to make it very clear, however, that FORA is not part of the cooperative, would not be part of the Joint Powers Authority, and that the final decision about whether or not this is formed or not will fall to those member agencies. So it will be up to the permittees to determine if they want to move forward or not. As a reminder, which I have mentioned to the board before, the decision to go, no-go, really needs to be made prior to April 2020 in order to fulfill the timeline for getting everything in place for a takeover of the environmental services by July 1st of 2020. If the Joint Powers Authority is not formed and there is no cooperative, that would mean that each of the individual entities would be responsible individually for implementing the Habitat Management Plan and for securing their own individual permits from both the feds and the state government in order to move forward with development. One thing that we've discussed quite a bit this last week is clearly building removal, and the connection, therefore, is kind of a really important piece of this, because without that building removal, the development might occur at a slower pace. Certainly, we've had numerous discussions with the folks with economic planning systems and also with the environmental team to look at all these different scenarios. We anticipate continuing to do that. So, again, we're planning on also constructing a website that will be Fort Ord Habitat Working Group.org. And the purpose of that is basically, we've had so many of you ask for connections to specific documents, reports, background materials. So the idea is to put these all in one spot that's easy to get to, as opposed to trying to crawl through all the various meetings that FORA has had over the last 25 years. This should be up and live within the next 7 to 10 days, and that would have, again, background information, comments, be able to ask questions, that sort of thing, so that we can continue to provide that information. Any suggestions, any kind of ideas of documents you'd like to see there? Of course, we're going to all dance now. That's it. It's, anyway, these will be a great opportunity for you to get us to put information up there. If there's something you'd like to see, we're happy to do that. And with that, I'm available to answer any questions you might have. I think, again, we're moving slowly but surely towards 2020. And I think that I also just wanted to add to others that we really do appreciate all the direction we've received from Mr. Hulamard, and we're going to miss him very much. But I'm available to answer any questions that you have regarding either the implementing agreements or the HCP JPA formation.
Thank you. Any board members with comments or questions? Director Hoffa.
You use the term cooperative. Is that different from JPA, or is that essentially just
It's the
a
same
synonym?
thing. It's used interchangeably in some of the documents that were prepared for the Habitat Conservation Plan, so we're kind of interchanging those in. The Joint Powers Authority is just the one means. You could do it through other areas. Legal and others have advised us that basically a Joint Powers Authority has the upside of, legal protection, and that's why we would, if something moves forward, we would think that would be it, but it's not a guarantee that that's the way it would be structured.
Okay, thank you. And then, if a joint powers authority were not created by July 1st, but it was created, I don't know, August 1st, what would happen in that intervening gap? Like, what would be the repercussions for the various agencies if it's created but it isn't created in time?
So great question. Currently, the FORA board has a set aside of about $15.9 million that's for the endowment that would be required to fund the JPA moving forward. If those funds are not allocated prior to the dissolution of FORA, those funds would be determined by this board to either be spent in another way, or as per the dissolution agreement, they would go to the county. So that fundamental chunk of money that would be the seed to make it go forward would not be on the table any longer. And that's important because that also means that you would potentially lose the CFD money that's collected for this year. And should this board decide, once everything else is figured out between the PERS liabilities and anything else you might have in the bank, that number could rise as high as 19 or 20 million. And again, the idea is that as of June 30th of 2020, anything in the FORA bank account that has not been expended is going to the county, and then the county will put that money out there.
Director Garfield.
They're like, write me the check.
Okay.
Yeah.
Could this board decide to put money in escrow for a 60-day period of time just to finish getting the signatures done, if it looks like that's a likely thing? That would be within our capacity to do?
I believe it would, but I would defer to legal on that.
Okay. Don't want to do it, but maybe there's a mechanism. And then the other one is you've had quite a list of I thought I was, but okay. You have quite a list of partners in this collaborative. What happens if some of them just don't want to be in it?
It's our daily question. I don't know why you all don't want to continue for another 20 years. I don't anyway. It's possible. And here's the thing: it's a math problem. Okay, so and I'll give you a good example. The Parks District has basically indicated that they would not have funding or the ability to participate in any type of joint powers authority or a cooperative, that their board would not be supportive of that. So when you look at that on paper, that doesn't really affect the overall viability because no money was coming in from them and we didn't really need too much in terms of the mitigation for their land. If perchance the city of Marina or Seaside decided that they did not want to participate, that would fundamentally change the viability of the JPA in order to implement the Habitat Conservation Plan. So it's really at a tipping point as determining who's in, who's out, how much land do we have to keep in that mitigation bank, and how much revenue do we have in order to fulfill the endowment. And I want to make clear, the endowment is paid for by development. That is with things moving forward, right? So as we go forward, it's also scalable. We've heard this quite a bit lately. What happens if development slows? We're looking at a recession in the next couple of years, potentially. What happens then? So one of the things the project team is looking at is developing a model that says, what happens if no development happens at all for the next 10 years? Unlikely, but we're going to look at it. And then at that point, what happens to the endowment and how is that reflected over time? And what kind of scenarios might you see? Those are the types of topics that we would be dealing with and diving into with those group meetings beginning in January. Because at this point, we can't guarantee anything because it's in flux. We don't know. But they're good questions to ask.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, Director Wizard.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, beg your pardon. I appreciate the thoroughness of your report. So, do I have it straight that if no development occurs, then you don't need any of the money?
No. If no development occurs, all right, then you're not getting money from development fees. So when I am a builder and I come in, I'm going to build X number of homes. The math on it right now says approximately, per unit, you would get, let's say, $8,000, which is approximate of what the CFD does at this point. If there's no development, then that means developers are not paying fees, which means they're not contributing to that endowment, so it's not going to grow. So while it's gaining interest, and I also want to point out there were some questions at the permittees meeting. It's not like you and I going to the bank and putting in a CD that gets very little interest. An endowment fund is managed; it's an investment portfolio. So we're talking about a substantially higher return on investment. That being said, if there's no money coming in to capitalize the endowment, at some point it zeroes out, right? Because there's no money coming in. So you need to look at that. But the important thing to remember is even if there's no development for 10 years and you're still responsible for the habitat management, you still have to do that, the stay-ahead provision and also maintaining the borderlands, all these other things. Even if the JPA doesn't happen, each agency is still responsible for that. So it's just a question of, the timing of how that all comes together. But that's hopefully something that will not happen. But we have to look at all those different scenarios that people are comfortable. I know that Member Morton has been actually quite good about giving us some very interesting options to consider, what if? And we have to look at those. And everyone has to be comfortable with that. Because again, no jurisdiction wants to sign up for something if they don't have a clear understanding about what the commitment is that they're making on behalf of their jurisdiction, especially in a time when people are struggling to balance budgets and maintain basic services for their communities.
Through the chair. So, I want to pose a hypothetical just to kind of flesh out an idea. If, let's say, lots of folks want to do some development all at the same time, and just the timing of the point at which the building permits are issued and the money being paid in isn't necessarily due right away. It isn't due at that exact moment. Could there be a circumstance in which people have to, for lack of a better phrase, join a queue because the money is not as available? There's not as much liquidity in the endowment as people start to disturb the land and incur costs for grading and site preparation?
Probably not, and here's why. Because one, the endowment gives you the ability to start again with that stay ahead, right? That gives you something in the bank to start with. And also when you're pulling permits for different things, usually the developer is going to pay those fees prior to turning dirt. There are very few jurisdictions that will allow a developer anywhere to turn dirt without money in hand. So you're always going to get that money up front. The question is really whether or not the pace of development will keep up with the impact of that particular project, right? So let's say I've got X number of units. Is there enough fees being generated by that to accomplish the things I need to do in terms of meeting my environmental requirement for mediation? That's on a case-by-case basis. And the other piece of that, which is really important, each jurisdiction has to come up with that fee, or the JPA or cooperative, should it be formed, would have to agree to a wide fee. Now, the City of Marina already has agreements in place with their developers. They've already locked in a dollar amount, right? So they would not be part of that kind of a thing. But it is possible, and it has been done by other habitat conservation programs in California, where you have a county-wide fee for habitat. And normally those are done as an in lieu fee as opposed to an impact fee because of the way that those are calculated and the way that the law works. But I think the bottom line is if the development occurs, the way this has been calculated out and looked at is if the development occurs, it will be enough to generate the money required in order to fulfill the environmental obligation.
Thank you.
Director Adams, something again?
Thank you very much. Thank you for your report. I wish that we had you working with us the first time I requested it, which was about 2 years ago.
Me too.
But I'm glad you're here now. So the question that I have is there existing language now, or would it be up to the JPA or to the individual entities to ensure that there is affordable housing that's built here, which would have much less fees brought in.
Great question. The JPA is specific to the fulfillment of the Habitat Conservation Plan, so it really does not have housing underneath its purvey. It's not part of it. But it would not be unusual for different agencies to form a regional co-op. We did discuss this earlier, and I about had my head taken off by AMBAG, but there are other agencies out there that have worked regionally on some of these housing issues. That being said, it would not be tied to the JPA. You would not be able to put that within that particular basket, but you would be able to have an opportunity to spend some quality bonding time with your other agencies and perhaps come up with another approach that might make that happen.
Director Morton?
So, twice you've said that if in fact the HCP cooperative, collective, whatever you want to call it, is not actually in place, that the money's going to go to the county. My recollection is the transition plan that was adopted in December of 2018 by this board indicated that the funds held by FORA, currently 15.9 million, would be used to fund the HCP if a JPA was put into place. Then secondarily, if not, directed for implementation of the habitat management plan, that is second in succession. And then third, that this board would have the discretion to divvy up the funds as appropriate, basically looking to what's each jurisdiction's responsibility. So we've already adopted a plan that doesn't just say HCP or it goes to the county. We have a structure in place.
You are absolutely correct. What I'm saying is that the board, any money that is not allocated prior to the end of FORA goes to the county. It is our understanding that this board will allocate those funds.
And the second thing that I wanted to point out is I cannot find the authority. I know you and I had an offline, and I'm happy to resolve that offline, but also that there should always be a distinction made in funds that are in the FORA general fund from a different source of funds versus CFD funds, which have a very restricted use under Mello-Roos. And so figuring out where they go and how they go and whether they go to the county, they still need to be treated very differently.
You are correct. And
we are not in agreement with them going to the county in the city of Marina. And I appreciate that you met with the city of Marina and the other jurisdictions to hear all of our points and look forward to the refinements coming back.
Let me be absolutely clear, and with all love to the county, it's not that we don't want the county to have money, but every jurisdiction we have talked to, in everyone, there are 100 hands out there that have got some idea about how to spend money if anything is left over. So I frankly don't think that there's going to be anything left over that's going to go to the county. We would be working obviously very closely with Josh and FORA staff to say, here's the options that are before you, the board, and then you would make those decisions to allocate as you see fit based on where you want to see it go. And to that end, one of the options with the CFD money potentially is to allocate that to habitat management plan implementation. And again, that would be at the discretion of the board and certainly something that you guys would take care of.
Thank you.
Director Oglesby?
I guess I just have one clarifying question about, you said, if you had economic development, then that would pay for the HCP. But if you don't have economic development, we still require to fund that. And so my question is, so then that would leave the jurisdictions to fund it on, meaning taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, and I want to be really clear about this because it's one of the things that people have come up with and said, well, what happens? We don't want to encumber our general fund. That's the bottom line. No one wants to encumber their general fund. For the other, we've looked at 20 plus HCPs in California, and it has happened on occasion where a jurisdiction will take a loan from general fund and then have it paid back through developer fees. But to be clear, in order for the endowment to work, you have to have approximately $40 million in the bank. And then the JPA would have a discussion about who's paying what section and how much is the nut, if you will, for each of those jurisdictions. If development doesn't happen at all, then at some point, one of two things happens. Either you dissolve the Joint Powers Authority and you go it on your own, or the jurisdictions basically contribute into the Joint Powers Authority and help it get along to the years until it can actually start earning. That's a discussion that you need to have, frankly, with all of those permittees to determine if that is a risk you are willing to take. There is a great body, if you will, of evidence and case studies that indicate that the likelihood of that happening is somewhat low. But again, you can't guarantee that. I cannot and will not tell you that your general fund will be never at risk, because that would be disingenuous. It's possible. It's unlikely, but it's possible.
I would just say to the board, that's, right now we have people within the city of Seaside that don't want us to develop any lands on the former Fort Ord, particularly our lands on the other side of General Jim Moore. I think you guys know we're doing Campus Town, trying to do some of the main gate, but my point is those things have to be successful. Otherwise, we're telling the taxpayer citizens that we need to fund this habitat management plan. We need to take taxpayer dollars for lands that you don't want them to use or can use. And I think as a board, we need to know that on the way out the door, because it's going to be hard for Seaside to sign on any of these agreements, knowing that by signing on, then we're obligated to go back to the citizens and say, well, we need to obligate some of the general funds. So I just throw that out there for discussions and move the conversation forward.
Through the chair, I would like to just address one thing on that to be sure that we're all on the same page. Even if a joint powers authority is not formed, there's no cooperative, Seaside, Marina, the county, you are all going to be responsible individually for habitat management in your jurisdiction. And it's going to happen whether there's a joint powers authority or not. And to the extent that one is less expensive or more expensive, that's again some of the information we're trying to get into. But just to be clear, you do not have an option of not handling your environmental impacts for your jurisdiction. That's a done deal. You don't have to do mitigation for projects that never happen. So if you don't build something, nothing's on it, you don't have to mitigate for something you didn't build. But you absolutely have to include mitigation for any lands that have already been identified as part of the habitat management plan.
Great, thank you. And I do have a couple comments along these lines, but I want to open it up to the public first. Is there any member of the public with any comments on either the transition plan implementing agreements or the habitat discussion?
Jonathan Brinkman, LAFCO, Monterey County. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the board. First, I want to thank you. LAFCO greatly appreciates your approval of the LAFCO FORA indemnification agreement that was on your consent agenda today. This long sought after agreement will benefit LAFCO and FORA through the dissolution process. Secondly, after my comments, I'll hand out a letter that LAFCO sent to FORA on November 19th. In this letter, LAFCO requests inclusion of LAFCO requested language in the multi-agency implementing agreement to clarify dissolution related items. Also, in that same letter, we have requested additional indemnification funding of $1.5 million for the high litigation risk associated with FORA dissolution, an additional $100,000 for LAFCO administration costs for its oversight post June 30, 2020. And just to note here that any unexpended funds would be returned to the FORA's underlying jurisdictions. As you may know, the FORA Act, the state law that created FORA, calls for LAFCO to provide for the orderly dissolution of the authority. This is an unfunded state mandate with potential for litigation for LAFCO. LAFCO is funded by its membership, which is comprised of Monterey County, 12 cities, and over 40 special district members. LAFCO doesn't particularly want to unduly burden these members who are not members of FORA if litigation costs rise. So on behalf of LAFCO, I thank you for your consideration of these items presented in our November 19th letter. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on this item? All right. Seeing none, I will close public comment. I am curious about the There was a section in the implementing agreement that was being, at least a couple of the drafts, where there was some language about some things pertaining to LAFCO, and I'm told that now that isn't there. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
To be honest, Chair, I'd have to look at the specific statutes, just given the number of changes we've made.
You too?
I would be, I know Jonathan and I have talked about this a couple of times. We've received comments from LAFCO and also comments from TAMC and from others, so we're trying to get as many of those in as possible. When there have been instances where either language was not included or was amended, it's usually due to counsel with FORA legal counsel, that for whatever reason they felt that that was not appropriate or changed. But we have tried to make a point of reaching back out to the folks and saying this is why that was not included, because not everybody got every single thing that they asked for.
Thank you. All right, so this is back to us now. So this is receiving reports and updates. One of the items suggested in the staff report is this idea of an ad hoc committee or a working group of the jurisdictions who have habitat lands to meet in a fairly concentrated way over a period of a couple of months to discuss the issues of current habitat obligation, financial constraints or funding mechanisms for habitat going forward, what the possibilities might be for existing lands to be used as part of a take permit process. I mean, there are a lot of issues, and so at the executive committee, we had a discussion about the advisability of having FORA FORA has brought us to the point of having an environmental impact report and having a habitat conservation plan proposal. And we kind of felt that maybe it was time for the jurisdictions who have the habitat responsibility to really sit down and look at each other eyeball to eyeball and see what agreements we can come up with. I mean, we really sort of need to take ownership of this and find what we can agree to and what might work from a financing perspective, and is it going to be a JPA? I mean, we really don't know what might be able to be agreed to. So one thing I was thinking about was having us form an ad hoc committee that would be made up of a board member from each of the landholding jurisdictions, Seaside, Marina, the county, Delray Oaks, and Monterey, and designating one staff person from each of those jurisdictions, but of course with the option that the jurisdictions can bring whatever staff might be needed to have these in-depth conversations and to be able to really get to a point of finding some options that might be able to be agreed to. I think we would also want to be able to invite, and make welcome the Bureau of Land Management, the Parks District if they want to be involved, any of the other entities that have habitat lands, UC, MPC, I'm not sure if CSUMB has habitat lands, I think so. So they would be welcome to participate as well, and probably the regulatory agencies, we're probably going to need them in the room. I mean, it's a pretty considerable group, but I think rather than having FORA have to propose and then get pushback, that we just need to get ourselves into a room and see what the options are that we can agree to before June 30th so that we have something before April. Okay, I think that's good. So anyway, that would be my proposal, is to establish an ad hoc committee with.
Do you need a motion?
Yes.
So I move that we create an ad hoc committee for the purposes of what are known as permittees, those with going to participate in any kind of habitat management be together and discuss that, not as a FORA action, but just independently discussing this.
Great, thank you. And I would just make a distinction that the members of the ad hoc committee
Would be FORA members.
would be FORA members,
Perfect.
and then all others invited to participate as needed or as desired.
Okay, so that's the motion.
Thank you. So there's a motion to form this working group in the form of an ad hoc committee. Is there a second? And then we'll have discussion. Second. Okay, thank you. Yes, now discussion.
The first question is what is the difference between this ad hoc committee and what RGS is doing kind of independently? They are kind of doing something that's outside of FORA, and if the answer to that is that this would be outside of FORA, why is it then this body has to then put together? It seems circular to me, and I don't understand. I'm kind of at a.
I'll tell you my thoughts, and anyone else can chime in, but what has happened so far is there have been a couple things that have happened. One is that RGS and FORA have had they had an all stakeholders meeting where the HCP and the JPA were proposed, and people sort of asked questions, and there was kind of a sense that, well, maybe this will work, maybe it won't. There were just a lot of questions. So then RGS and FORA were meeting individually with the county and the different people. In a sense, that's leaving it up to FORA to come to make the agreement work. And I think we need to say thank you to FORA for getting us this far and get the jurisdictions in the room talking to each other about what their questions are, but also what do you need in Delray Oaks, and where does that fit into the possibilities, the constraints, as it relates to what Marina or the county or Seaside can do, how much money is going to come in, all that kind of stuff, so that we're not just having FORA propose something and then we argue with FORA. We're never going to get to an agreement that way. And we can't do it by having Delray Oaks talking to FORA or RGS without the county in the room, because we all have to agree. And it just seemed to me that it would be faster if Delray Oaks and any staff people that you feel like you need to be able, you might want your counsel in the room, you might want your public works, you might want, whatever staff you need to be in the room to raise the questions and raise the issues and talk about what you're trying to do together with the other jurisdictions, sort of like they do in the admin committee, where they all sort of, talk it through, and then something starts to emerge that looks possible. That kind of working environment is.
Just, if I could, Director, just one then follow-up question on that. I'm not opposed. I think we should get in a room and kind of hash this thing out. I thought that's what we were doing with the RGS effort. What's I guess the difference in this group would be, it'd be very focused and very specific. Questions would be raised. Are we then taking $4 to answer those questions? Is that what we would have?
There are resources that FORA has made available. So EPS and RGS. There is a good deal of this information that is available. Might have to be presented in a little bit different way, but I think those resources are present and are meant to be used for this kind of process. So that's the idea, is that yes, FORA and RGS would still be present in the room and could be resources to the discussion if there's a need for information to be presented in a different way, or
okay.
Yeah. Yes, Director Garfield.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow along the same. Wasn't there a meeting November 20th of all parties for this?
Yes, and that's where part of this concern is that there's a kind of, the dynamic is not going to get us to success if we expect RGS and FORA to figure it out for us. But the people who who are going to be responsible. So for the county, we have a lot of land that is habitat land. We are responsible for managing that. If we can't figure out a way to work together on where the money's going to come from, all of that stuff, we're still going to have that responsibility. So what we're trying to do is figure out what's realistic with the money that we can identify to take care of current responsibilities. How much more can we possibly do in terms of future development? How can we make this work?
I understand that, and I just I think there is any group you pull together, they have to work it out, and so as this group has met once, November 20th, I wouldn't expect them to be in a fast motion towards success. But I do think that I totally concur with what your point is, that the member participants that are here on FORA have both a vested interest, experience, and focus that should be brought to bear to this collective effort. I don't know who from the county, for example, attended the November 20th meeting. Maybe you should have gone with them because you really have some very definite ideas. I don't want to put in two parallel efforts where if you have two entities that are responsible for a single thing, neither one of them steps up. And so I'd like to propose that we give this group, get them on there, get working, get your representation in place, and give it a couple weeks of meetings to see how well it's going. Exert your influence with your representative, and rather than parallel it. That would be my suggestion.
I think that is what's being proposed. I don't understand what.
My understanding from what you said is that you wanted to create an entity, a subcommittee of members of FORA to represent your various entities and invite other groups in. My understanding was that group is in the process of being formed, not necessarily with FORA members as the representatives from the various participants. Am I missing something?
I guess what I would say is that this would be a redirection. This would be taking a lot of the same people and shifting the emphasis from it being what it has been to being something where the jurisdictions who are responsible now for habitat management and will be for the same amount or more in the future, that they can sit down and work eyeball to eyeball, not react to a proposal from somebody else, but to say, okay, and be a working group rather than reacting to something that's being given to them. It's going to be the same people. It's just a different format, and there wouldn't be a parallel operation going on. Director Morton?
So on November 20th, the meeting, the permittees were invited, City of Marina. We brought our entire staff from development to planning, city manager, assistant city manager, myself. We're all there. We listened. It was presentation. We have been, at this point, thank you for the investment of the funds and the commitment of this board to say, to do a habitat conservation plan, you will need the $15.9 million from FORA that FORA is expected to have in June 30th, 2020. And you as member jurisdictions, if you want the benefit of this base-wide permit, you will need to have a commitment to $40 million. So now we need to sit in a room, for example, when you read what's been in front of this FORA board, there are 6 entitled projects. Those 6 entitled projects are not going to be, unless there's a contractual obligation or the jurisdictions are able to collect the pre-existing FORA CFD, then those would be sources of money that we would put in. So when, as the City of Marina representative, what I am looking at is that we have 1,609 homes that will be built potentially in the next 20 to 30 years. Because they're previously entitled, the city of Marina is a known fixed amount of money that we will be contributing to that $40 million. So what I would like to do is sit down with Delray Oaks and say, here's the amount of money that's coming in. County has I don't know your numbers, I'm using hypothetical numbers at this point. They have an East Garrison project that's already entitled. They're one of the 6 projects. If they still have 400 homes that have not been built at the $8,000 per unit, we know what their maximum contribution is going to be. So if we sit down and look at the 6 entitled projects, we all have an idea of if the development does go forward, and these entitled projects are going to go forward, at what rate we have to make that assumption. But then we know what our shortfall is, which is another way of approaching it from a very simplistic standpoint that my city can understand. So if we can get in adding that all up, and then saying for our undeveloped or already not entitled projects, here's the nut that you have to crack. What's that distinction, the difference between what we're already saying we're going to pay and have entitled to pay, and if it's collectible, then to what do we need to raise? So currently under the standard of FORA, everybody's contributing 30% of approximately $24,000 per house. That's $8,000 per household. And so now if what's left to be built in that 6,160 homes at $8,000 a unit doesn't make that number. And I get acreage has some contributions. I'm simplifying it for this discussion. Is Delray Oaks or the city of Seaside, are they willing to charge $10,000 or $12,000 for this base-wide permit per unit? That's the type of discussion that I would be looking forward to in this kind of consensus. Or how do we tackle this $40 million to make it less than $40 million? What are the methods of getting that achieved? And I look forward to our consultants telling, is there a way that we can cut that number down so that it does become viable? And after that discussion, if we're not able to do that, the other thing we have to look at, if you do a JPA for the habitat management plan, is that a viable alternative if we can't get to 40 million by agreement? But all of us are talking about in jurisdictions that are playing is that this is not FORA money. This is money that we will be collecting as jurisdictions and committing as development fees, as impact fees, as your general fund from whatever source. So I want to know from Delray Oaks, what are you willing to put in for this plan? Your funding might be completely different. And so I echo this process of until we get in that room and really understand each other and what each of us currently have under entitled projects to bring, what the gap is, and really how do we crack that nut as a collective group, we're not going to get anywhere. So that's why I made this motion, and I'm hoping that answered your question about why get in the room together.
And and I think Michael Hulamard or Kendall Flint can also speak to how they see this.
I think the issue here is it's the why, okay? The reason we want to have an ad hoc committee is because, frankly, when we try to pull you all together in a room and talk to you, we have a challenge with Brown Act, we have a challenge with a bunch of other stuff. It's just that simple. So the idea is that if we form an ad hoc committee, we get the bodies in a room, the room where it happened. I just saw Hamilton, I'm still kind of high on that. But that's the reason, because if we notice it like that, we're good. There's no additional money involved. It falls under the existing RGS contract. EPS and others would come at those meetings as needed to discuss whether it's a legal thing. It'd be, our legal counsel. If it's related to the HCP, it would be obviously DDA or ICF. But that's the idea. So 2 people from each jurisdiction. And the other reason for that, frankly, is because we need a manageable, small enough, intelligent group to fight it out. What we don't want to have is grandstanding and all kinds of other stuff. We want the people who are going to make the decision. That's why board member and staff, so we can go forward. It's pretty much that straightforward.
And I would agree with Kendall's comments and say that the board has already approved funding for RGS to provide the support for this element of the work, and the board has already approved additional dollars that we have with our consultant team to help make this happen. To the extent that you've already approved that, this doesn't change what the expenditures are to provide the support, but provides a mechanism by creating a habitat management working group that's formed as an ad hoc committee with a sunset, limited exposure that allows that group to get together without triggering the whole requirements for administrative committee and noticing and all of that jazz, that puts extra time and bureaucracy on top of the process that limits the ability and the flexibility you need to make it happen.
Perfect explanation. Thank you very much.
Phew. Great, thank you. Yes, Director Hoffa.
So I think it is good to get together and talk. In the end, it's ultimately the policymakers who will need to get each of their jurisdictions hopefully on board with whatever we come up with. I do just want to caution and say, I think it would be really helpful if the administrative committee, maybe in conjunction with RGS, could have some outline of various strategies or ways forward so that we're not just talking in the abstract. I think that would be really helpful so that it can be a very focused discussion.
Yeah, I think that's been launched. So yeah, great, good. Well, great discussion. And yes, please.
I just want to add one thing. This is a group that isn't necessarily should be using the word permittees necessarily. The idea of this is to structure the best way that we can manage habitat at Fort Ord, because the critters that are out there don't know the difference between the boundaries between the jurisdictions. And I think not saying permittees also doesn't presume that everybody wants a permit. So this is really a habitat management working group that understands what the costs are to jurisdictions and how, working together, you can limit your exposure.
Okay, great. So we have a motion and a second. And Madam Clerk, you got the seconder of the motion. That was Director Berkeley. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Great, thank you. And if we are expeditious, we can launch ourselves on our final business item before the witching hour of 5 o'clock has struck. It looks like 1 minute too over there.
Thank you for your patience. I may need 3 minutes because I don't know if I can go that fast. All right, so long story short, Eucalyptus Road had some infiltrators fail underneath the road. The road is fine, nothing wrong with it, but the infiltrators underneath it have failed. Infiltrators, we'll talk about that. 2014, we were notified that there was a failure. 2015, Cregan and D'Angelo was on the job, but Cregan D'Angelo has lost all of its engineers, and well, they're still in business, but everyone who's familiar with the projects are gone. We had a turnover in our own engineering staff. We brought on new engineers. We did root cause analysis as to why things were failing. We discovered that there was really no one to blame, and regardless of who was to blame, they still need to be repaired. What an infiltrator is, these yellow things are infiltrators here. Basically, there's cisterns underneath the road that hold excess rainwater, and they allow that rainwater to percolate down into the aquifer. Right now, instead of the water sitting in here and going down into the ground, they're blowing out the side. So what we have is we have a road, and then we have what's called a fill slope. Basically, it's the slope along here. And the infiltrators sit underneath this dirt, and they are blowing out the side. Water's leaking out the side of it and spilling down into the road and coming down into the area next to it. And so what we're looking to do is fix those infiltrators. So in 2018, staff worked with our engineers to decrease the scope from 5 infiltrator repairs down to 3. Basically, we used a bioretention system to be able to do that, and in so doing, we saved about $750,000 in construction costs. We created a programmatic construction support plan, and this facilitates future digging for maintenance on adjacent munition response areas around this particular roadway. Harrison Associates prepared 90% plans and estimates of probable cost, and Woodson Engineers completed a plan check. Reimer and Associates coordinated the specifications pertaining to the training and the munitions work for the contractor, and FORA is coordinated with the City of Seaside Engineering on the project. November last month, just a few weeks ago, we received DTSC, EPA, and Army sign-off on the construction support plan, and so now this project is ready for public bid and construction. What I've provided for you in the report and here is a budget for the project. And construction estimates by the engineer is at $560,000. We intend to have some survey and staking. What's really important to know through this list is this 25% contingency. All right, and I'll talk about that 25% contingency in a second. So the total budget is $1.2 million, and we plan on being completed by May 30, 2020. Now, what happens if the project has overruns past June 30, 2020? Because, it's a little bit of a critical time. Harrison Associates is our construction manager. They are also the construction managers for the City of Seaside. So there will be continuity between consultants and who's actually on the field. Second is our contracts identify the City of Seaside as the successor and assigned for the particular project. Not for every project, but for this particular project. The project budget has a 25% contingency in order to decrease the risk of overruns. That 25% contingency allows us to resolve those issues quickly and move it forward. So by the time, June comes, we're done with the roadway, it's closed out, we've provided notice of completion. So because of this, we're asking that the board authorize the executive officer to execute all bidding requirements and associated contracts for the completion of Eucalyptus Road infiltrator repairs, not to exceed a project budget of $1.1 million. I'm available for questions.
All right. Any questions from board members at this point? Yes, Director Garfield.
Who will be responsible for any problems that incur later from this project, so that we don't have a repeat of this one? I mean, who's liable for failures down the road of this work?
Well, as long as if they're within the warranty period after the construction is done, it'll be the contractor that performs the work. And after that time, I assume it will be the City of Seaside, because they will be accepting the improvements.
Okay, thank you.
And I had a question, because it seemed like the Eucalyptus Road was an offshoot, if you will, of a larger project. Are there other infiltrators? Because this isn't the first time. I get maybe it's been Eucalyptus Road all the way along. We've been hearing about this, but
Eucalyptus Road has been the primary road with the particular infiltrator problems. Like we said, we did a root cause analysis. They couldn't figure out if it was because of the in-situ soil, if it was because the ground squirrels tunneling in through the side of it. We weren't able to figure out the exact cause, but we do have a solution that's a lot easier to maintain, will prevent blowout in the future. And when the road is open, we'll allow access back to the Veterans Cemetery and to the Monterey College public safety training grounds and to the different schools that are back in that area.
So we check to make sure that this isn't happening out of sight underneath General Gym or somewhere else.
I have not had any reports of any maintenance issues anywhere else.
But we checked.
Unless you see it blowing out the side, you can't see it.
Okay. All right. Director Oglesby.
I thought I heard him just say that they found a problem, they fixed it so it won't happen again. Right after the question was asked, if it happens again, who's responsible? So I'm trying to figure out which one is which, right? And I understand Seaside responsible; they'll own the land and the road, but is this going to fix it? I mean, are we guaranteeing that because we have new technology, or is it just one of those things, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, if a ground squirrel goes in there, right? Yeah. But I mean, you just said, you said it so succinctly, like it would never happen again.
Yes.
I don't know if there's a new technology that's going to mess.
Well, actually, we're using, Merit, it's a really good question. We're using old technology. Instead of putting cisterns under the road, we're creating bioretention ponds alongside of the road. The ponds are easy to access. They're just ponds is what they are. So there's simple to maintain, and we don't have to worry about overruns or issues in the future.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Said, for the presentation. I recall just yesterday evening, I went for a little walkabout, and General Jim Moore south of Hilby, there's some fresh cement and some new gravel along the edge of the road. Do you recall if General Jim Moore was constructed in a similar fashion as Eucalyptus Road, using similar technologies and expertise?
Unfortunately, I wasn't involved in the whole construction process. The contractor is no longer available, the engineers are no longer available, so it's really difficult to give you an answer. I could make an assumption, and the assumption would be probably similar.
So the reason I bring that up is because General Jim Moore is used by more than 0 cars per day, and there are many people who walk and bike along the sidewalk, and that road failed and was recently repaired. Eucalyptus Road is used by maybe a car a week, and it's usually a heavy truck moving non-potable water or CHP staging there for a Big Little Lies film shoot or something.
Right.
It's very infrequent that we use that road. I guess just by virtue of my question is, what is the value of expending up to $1.1 million to fix a road that's hardly used compared to putting that money into escrow or something for a future repair of General Jim?
So there's a long-term value and a short-term value, and those value assessments, given that it's a seaside road, are for you to consider. But this particular roadway facilitates access for a number of reasons. One is to the Veterans Cemetery. 2 is to the Marine Peninsula College public training center, and we have an agreement with them to make sure they have access back there, as well as with BLM properties and whatnot. So this roadway has always been intended for use, and the reason it is not currently in public use is because we're waiting for final documentation with the transfer from the Army through FORA to Seaside. As far as future use on General Jim Moore, we haven't seen any failures of infiltrators. What we have seen is there's been a lack of maintenance, and there have been large animals and other things, and so there have been erosion control issues on the roadway, but we haven't seen any failures as part of the infiltrators. Setting aside money is setting aside money for something that may or may not happen.
Thank you, Mr. Said. And I just wanted to clarify, but for a reprioritization of staff hours at the Department of Army, Eucalyptus Road would be open today?
It could be. It would be up to the city of Seaside. It's going to be your road.
Thank you.
I did want to add, really just to answer your question with one last item, and that the erosion that occurs there has environmental damage that happens, including impact on endangered species and others. So there's another impact that potentially is there. In this particular case, it's in an area where we don't have high concentrations or anything like that, so it's not, but the erosion is a no-no because it washes stuff out and it could potentially expose munitions and explosives.
Okay, that was questions from board members. Any member of the public?
I wanted to just ask one
Yes.
follow-up question
Yes.
to that. So I'm a little bit confused, and I'm sorry, I know that Eucalyptus connects at one end with General Jim Moore. At the other end, it already connects with the sites that you mentioned, the cemetery?
Yes, it connects to Parker
But it's not
Flats
open
and
yet.
to Eucalyptus Road. They're currently not open.
Okay. So then to my colleagues from the city of Seaside is that you've identified erosion along General Jim Moore. You've identified a road that has 1 truck a week. Is this is our 1 million contingency that's in our CIP budget, so we get to spend it once. And the question that I have for my colleagues, is this the best investment, or should we fix the erosion on General Jim Moore that's more heavily traveled? It's not my call, it's your jurisdiction. So I just wanted to hear, because I heard conflicting comments.
It's not our road right
Not
now,
yet.
and so it needs to be fixed before it's turned over to us.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any member of the public wanting to comment on this item? All right, I'll close public comment and bring it back to this board for action. We're being asked to authorize the executive officer to execute everything to get Eucalyptus Road fixed.
I'll make a motion to accept the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Motion by Gagliotti. Is there a second? Second by Director Wizard. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. It's now after 5 o'clock, so I would need a motion to continue. We have basically public comment and then any items from members. So,
I would move an extension to allow public comment.
okay, there's a motion and a second to allow for public comment. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, thank you. We'll move now to public comment. Is there any member of the public wishing to comment on any items not on today's agenda? Right, yeah. Do you want to be between us and the exit? All right, I'll close public comment, and we are adjourned. Our next meeting is January 10th at 2 p.m., and I wish you all happy holidays and Happy New Year.
Happy holidays to everybody.